some of the cases are really so intense. When I see a situation of a patient who just came over the border with a pregnancy unattended to, it just brings back so much of the foundation of what's important to me and what is important to my patient, and holding on to the fact it's my role to not only be a physician, but to also advocate for this person. And that's the biggest, I don't want to call it a pressure. It's just like a responsibility, a social responsibility to really advocate as a human for another human.
This is the Visible Voices podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Resa Lewis. In today's episode, I speak with Ruthie Shatz and Dr. Mirtha Macri. If you scroll back to episode 50, listeners, you'll see that I've recorded with this duo before. At that time, we talked about Lenox Hill, a docuseries on Netflix. Well, today we speak about another docuseries on Netflix entitled Emergency NYC, as in New York City. Ruthie is an award-winning documentarian. She's a writer, she's a director, she's a producer, and with her husband, Adi Barish, they are Ulari Films. Mirtha is an emergency medicine physician. She trained at St. Luke's Roosevelt and currently works at Northwell Health. She wears an administrative cap of patient safety and quality improvement. Now, I bring up St. Luke's Roosevelt because I worked there for 12 years, and that's how Mirtha and I first met. We were paired as mentor-mentee and, well, as faculty resident, and so we took care of patients together. When we get to the conversation, I've focused on Ruthie and asked her how exactly she does it. How does she so accurately portray patients, scenarios, and care in the hospital, in the ambulance, at the bedside, by an emergency physician, by another type of physician? She just really, really, really captures it. Now, trigger warning, we do talk about gun violence and we do talk about the accumulative effects of trauma. And finally, we really, really, really talk about the accurate portrayal of medicine in New York City as a representation of what's happening in America. Before we pressed record, Mirtha and I were speaking, and I was saying how you just really, really capture emergency medicine and acute care medicine in New York City and the boroughs really, really accurately, really well. I think for any listeners, any viewers that are like, is that an exaggeration? Was that dramatization for television? It's not. You really capture the physicians, the patients, the caretakers, the non-physician healthcare professionals who are featured in the film. Mirtha, you were the emergency medicine focus in Lenox Hill and the emergency medicine focus in Emergency NYC from the physician perspective. What changed for you between the two?
So a lot happened between the two. Major events, right? And we had a pandemic that was prolonged when everybody thought it would only be a few months. It turned into years of our lives. And I think that most people's lives in healthcare were completely transformed in some way, whether big or small. And for me, I think that we already had a healthcare crisis. I wasn't as, I want to say, informed or on it like I was after the pandemic, because at least in emergency medicine, what we saw were all the people who already had struggles within their healthcare system, socioeconomic struggles, personal, mental health, everything somewhat unraveled and lost control for some of these patients. So then I feel like after the pandemic, all of this was uncovered, unearthed, and where we saw, a family of 4 have minimal resources, then we saw the magnitude of it. Really, we saw it so much more. And I think Emergency NYC shows those struggles and the crisis that's going on in our country with everything from our healthcare system to healthcare inequity and gun violence. And we're much more aware and proactive, some of us, as physicians, as to what the challenges we are facing. And we're also seeing it personally because we have a higher burnout rate after the pandemic. I think that's one of the biggest factors where I'm seeing some of my colleagues, struggling. As myself in the beginning, I had some challenges that I had to overcome in order to, move forward in a stable way. So that's the biggest difference.
Ruthie, when you and I first met, I said, you seem to have a penchant, a bent, a like for medical stories and showing emergency and critical care. And I'm wondering what you saw as a change in the actors who aren't actors, the actual healthcare professionals from filming Lenox Hill to filming Emergency NYC?
After the pandemic, it felt like everybody's beaten up, and super exhausted, feeling even more unseen as they have before. If you'd think that the pandemic flushed everything out and made them more seen, people looking for escapism right now. And there's something so for granted, in doctors and physicians in general, that people are very quickly forget. And so I've seen people that are at the edge of their, abilities, super frustrated, super worn out. It's not that they feel unappreciated, but I think, it's just an overall fatigue that is super taxing. And it was apparent. It was a hardcore production in that sense, having to deal with all these feelings of people.
Yeah. The series is 8 episodes, and I'm just going to list the titles of each episode. Number 1 was You're Not Alone, Ready or Not, Under Pressure, Walking to America, No Guts, No Glory, Home Sweet Home, Reset, and Change of Heart. As the director-producer, how did these get ordered? How did you organize them?
When you film documentary, you have an idea and you have some sort of script in your mind, but basically you're organizing chaos, right? And so throughout the production and through the experiences we had, we figured out what are the main topics we want to touch and what are the main topics in the country that are crucial to be handled. And one of them was, of course, the gun violence issue. It was what we just talked about, the fatigue and those relationships with the patients and the fact that you never know what to expect and you never know what you're going to get. And you have to really recruit yourself and bring the best in you to solve these situations. So, when you're building a structure, a story, anything cinematic, you're trying to make sense of it and build something that will be inherently, powerful and propelling, but also will tell something new in a manner that will make sense to you, right? And to the audience. So I think each one of these episodes is some sort of the trajectory that we felt that each one of the characters is going through, and also healthcare in a way. And so you're really beaten up, you're worn out and everything, but ultimately you choose this. It's something that you have to be super passionate about. So the change of heart really speaks to all these elements. And of course, we illustrated it with the heart at the end, but it is all part of this cosmos, of life. And one of the most beautiful things about medicine and the reason we're actually so hard to leave this territory and move to other things is that you have a whole life in front of you in this cooped up place. And it can be 20, 100 hospitals, but they all deal with the same thing, right? Saving people's life. And you have these individuals that are doing something that nobody else does. They're actually doing something meaningful that has consequences.
Yeah, organizing the chaos, which is very much what we do in emergency medicine. And Mirtha, there's actually a scene where you're out on the street, it's nighttime, you're taking a break and you're speaking to the camera. You're like, I love this. I love anything. Who knows what's going to come in? It's that time of night. Speak a little bit about your experience and the episodes you're in, the storylines that are shown, and how it actually is quite reflective of where we are right now in healthcare.
Yeah, I think that Ruthie and Adi told a beautiful story. It really came together so nicely. I never imagined that it would tell such an impactful story. But, one thing that like I mentioned before, from the first season to the second series, I was more awake. There were issues that were so impactful, the crisis going on in healthcare, gun violence, the opiate crisis. And we saw all that manifest, like right in real time. And I think it brought me like a heightened awareness of the type of doctor I've become, the type of partner I've become, the type of parent, daughter, all those things sort of manifested itself all in one, so that now when I see a situation, and some of the cases are really so intense, when I see a situation of a patient who just came over the border with a pregnancy unattended to, it just brings back so much of the foundation of what's important to me and what is important to my patient, and always holding on to the fact it's my role to not only be a physician, but to also advocate for this person. And that's the biggest, I don't want to call it a pressure. It's just like a responsibility, a social responsibility to really advocate as a human for another human.
Yeah. Ruthie, you definitely feature pregnant women in Lenox Hill as well as in Emergency NYC. And I'm wondering if you can dive a little deeper into why.
It's funny enough because this show actually started, our medical interest started from my pregnancy. I was having a very troubled pregnancy. And during that time, my mom was dying, and we were hospitalized in the same hospital. And at that point, Adi and myself, we started writing fiction hospital show because the situations were so extreme, and we learned to know the people in the inside so well and understand how complicated it is. And the front that we used to know from other programs or shows is so out of reality, and so that's one thing. But I think, to go away from my experience, which I talked about a lot before, the experience of life and death at a hospital is a powerful thing. And ultimately what we're doing is we're portraying humanity in its best form. And going from giving life to this world and helping people to do something very, very basic and very natural, and having to deal with all the circumstances, the families, and everything around it through life and death is such a powerful thing. Also, not just for storytelling at large, there's so much lack of hope in the world, and there's so much we can do as filmmakers to polarize a subject that can give some hope. And I think, without romanticizing it too much, I think, it's one of our goals to be able to give something back and to make people, have a second look at how life should look like and what it is to be giving, And so I think that's why, but also because it's inherently, something that happened in a hospital, which I don't think it should, but it does. That's for a different discussion.
I'm still in love with New York City, and New York City is exquisitely photogenic. Ruthie, I think you and I share this passion and this love. In Emergency NYC, there are a lot of shots at night, beautiful lights, skyline pictures, and also, and this comes directly from one of the episodes, sirens are the soundtrack of the city.
You know how it is when you meet someone and you feel so comfortable in your skin. That's how it is for me in New York. So everywhere I go and everything I see is a joy for me, except for the trash on the streets that is overwhelming in the past few years. This city has so many stories to tell. So everything about it is captivating for me. And the night, the day, the bridges, the variety of people you have here, the conflict you see constantly on the street, the love, the diversity. It's like, it feels to me so many times as the only sane place on earth in a way, that have millions of people. Like, it's the most populated city in America. And yet with that, it has such an amazing synchronicity. And the sounds, like the soundtrack of the city, I really pushed for this line because it really signified New York. You come to New York from anywhere else, the first thing you hear is those sirens. And there are all these millions of people, someone needs to take care of them. So I think, I'm always fascinated with capturing the city cinematically and which new angle I can bring that I haven't seen yet. But I saw it myself, but I haven't seen it captured. It really speaks to, I think, to Adi and I's aesthetics and the things that we love. We come from a fiction background, although we only did documentaries, but that's what we learned. And I've been writing since I was 3, like it's my world. And so whatever story, even if it's documentary, I will always try to crack the story. And through the visuals, you can say so much, especially about New York.
I'm Dr. Resa E. Lewis, dropping in to tell you about a book that Dr. Adair Landry and I wrote. It's called Microskills, Small Actions, Big Impact. It's a business self-help book being published in April of 2024 by HarperCollins. We believe every future goal, complicated task, and healthy habit can be broken down into simple, measurable, and tiny skills that you can practice and then excel by removing obstacles, overcoming assumptions, and maximizing your potential at work and in life. You can pre-order it now. Go to bookshop.org, amazon.com, or wherever you buy your books. The emergency department is the portal of entry. We see it all, Mirtha. And the specific storylines, the patients that are captured in your scenes, in your interactions, in your episodes really hit on houselessness, lack of access to medications, someone setting fire to their apartment and then insisting on going home. And I'm interested in your perspective on the patients that were featured.
I still am in awe at how this story came together, because I think that everything that Ruthie and Adi wanted to portray for the world, it all came together across all these different specialties. Specifically, emergency medicine, we're the front line, where the doors open. This is where the party starts. And every patient I feel that we got in each series represented, an important issue, crisis going on right now in this country. Everything from homelessness, migrant medicine, which we are still seeing. Actually, when we did the series, that was the beginning of the migrant influx in New York City. And in the last year alone, within Greenwich Village, we have 3 very full migrant hotels that belong to New York, that were in use prior to the migrant influx for tourism, and now are migrant hotels. And, we learned to care for patients that have absolutely no form of healthcare, medication. It's like we're working with someone who has never seen even a physician. And to see that in New York City is just, unbelievable, but it's happening right now. And so our patients that come into the ER in the series really are a true reflection of what are the crises that we're facing as Americans, maybe not personally, but what are other people facing?
Yeah, it's completely accurate portrayal of what's going on in medicine, and certainly in New York City. Ruthie, I'm particularly interested in the cumulative effects of trauma, effects on physicians, but also the effect on bystanders and witnesses. And Ruthie, the extent to which you and Adi feel traumatized or felt that trauma based on the patient scenarios or the trauma surgery, the gun violence.
It's so interesting. I think about it a lot because it really takes time to process all of that, and when you're filming, you sort of protected behind the camera, and we have this mechanism of detachment where we really try not to be present at the moment and just look at it from a perspective. It's kind of insane how you have to cut yourself. But in the instance of this child, that he was brought up to the hospital with his mom, it was devastating to a level that I can't even totally break it down for myself yet, because, we were there. You see this mom, it can be you, I instantly thought about myself, about my child, about my kids, about what's going on in this city. I live in a neighborhood where 100 yards from me, there are shooting all the time, and it really catches you and gives you a crazy perspective about this life and how precious they are, but also how fragile they are. And this kid, I'm still in touch with him. I care about him deeply. And, I care about everyone that I film, but there was something about it that really resonated with me. Is the age of my son, and it is hard. But we do talk a lot about it, and we have great supportive system. I think we managed to create throughout the years in our production company this open space for everyone to talk. Also with our editors, they also have to face all these materials. And sometimes it's much more horrendous when you see it on the editing table rather than you on location. Because on location, you have all the people around you. You see the efforts of helping people. You feel part of something bigger. But when you get it into your safe space, it can be really shocking and really distorting. So we have a lot of talks about it. We analyze everything, and we really support our people and get support ourselves. I was through therapy through this production, which I haven't been in years. I really needed that support, and also having to help my people as well. And, right now I feel, for example, I'm so happy that, I'm dealing with other stuff right now because I'm so burnt. Like I really need this moment to reflect on everything that we've done and see how I can, how I can be in a different space and help in other things. Because there's at the moment nothing in me that I can give, or I cannot face being in such situation in the near future. Although I know it's going to go away fast. I said it last time and it was very quickly, the pandemic hit and we did another episode. And then we were a few months later into emergency. I just love this work so much. I do feel like I have a mission here. I feel like it's important to show these things. I feel like it's important to show what the doctors are going through. And this is part of the reason we choose to portray these things so openly. And I know it's visceral and it's painful and it's gut-wrenching to watch these things. But it's super important because it really helps you understand their framework and where their mental health states. The doctors, the physicians, the nurses, what they need to bring home is this baggage that I was, my earth was shaking when I saw this kid, but they have it on a daily basis. Throughout this production, because it's emergency, we've seen things that I haven't seen in all the years that I was filming medicine. And having to have this charge as a acute medicine doctor to bring it home with you, it's huge. And it's a testament to what an amazing people they are and how big they are in that sense. Even if they say, I have a technique, I know how to block it, all these things, they are still human beings and it goes with them, it has a toll. Yeah. So I think someone needs to tell it. And I feel very comfortable in my skin telling it. So whatever, as hard as it is, I'll keep telling this story.
Mirtha, I'm interested in your reflections on this cumulative effect of trauma that we receive as emergency physicians and about your own voice.
Well, that's a big question. Another thing that I noticed from the beginning, from Lenox Hill to Emergency NYC, was, I think I've mentioned this, not only a change in myself, but a change in my colleagues. And it was so obvious that many of us were in different stages of healing. And some of us still are. Life still goes on. We still have our own impacting, crises that happen in our lives, that on top of that, we have to go to work and manage another crisis. And it's tough. It's almost like maneuvering through a storm. And how do you block certain aspects of that? And how do you balance your own mental health with your professional life? And I think that's been the biggest challenge for me right now, is balancing, my own mental health, watching my colleague try to balance that as well, and entering a new branch within my career of administrative quality work. And at the same time, keeping my passions going. So I do have passions outside of this. I think that the series opened the doors for a lot of those and are helping me to manifest my voice and amplify it. Because I think it's one thing finding it, but then when you find it, how do you use it? How do you keep it going? How do you keep it growing? And right now I feel like I'm at a golden time in my life. I feel good, but a lot of that requires a lot of work. And I always go back after the series. The series opened up my mind to, like, what are my roots? Like, what is my foundation? And I think that your question of when did you find your voice is such an important question. And I think about that question all the time, Resa, all the time, apart from this podcast. And it's such an important question. I think everybody should ask themselves, because I think we all have a voice and we all have the ability to, finesse it and manifest it and amplify it. And that's where I'm at right now. I think the show made me more aware of what my platform is, what my agency is, and using that to not only be a better doctor, because I do feel like I'm a better doctor after all this, but also being a better partner, a better colleague, a better friend, a better mother, all these ways that I can improve myself and giving ourselves more credit than what we normally give ourselves.
Beautiful. Ruthie, you were able to capture the chaos in a way that you made it look easy. And I know it was not easy. What were your tricks, or what did you learn perhaps from Lenox Hill that made it even easier for you to access getting the action this time?
There are no shortcuts. You don't really learn anything. The reality is super chaotic. It's unexpected. Every situation needs to be handled with, the best of care. You have to be super gentle and read the room in a manner that really allows you to be careful, be sensitive to people. All these things are taken into effect when you're filming. We train our crew to be very diligent about what they're doing. And it was super, super complicated. And there isn't any trick. It's a lot of sensitivity and caring and having a very trained people, around you that can help you execute it. But I think mainly is that we remain very small. We are usually a team of 2 max. And, we have someone who's taking care of all the signing and all these things. But once we start filming, this person is in the background and we can allow ourselves to be more dynamic in the room. But there's never an easy access to that.
You both have brought up the prominent storyline of gun violence. In fact, from one of the episodes, Gun Violence, an American Form of Tragedy. I'm interested, Ruthie, in your reflection on gun violence in America, given that you are familiar with another country and part of your own life has been in Israel.
I mean, look, it's so interesting because, in Israel, soldiers, they have guns, they bring them home, they put them under the bed. There are no incidents ever. It is mind-boggling to see what's going on here with the weapons. But I think it really taps to a lot of things here that are mainly economics. Like what really leads the decision-making of how this country is going to look like comes from capitalism and comes from the fact that money is God. And so this is really affects a lot of things: education, gun violence, mental health, public health, the fact that you really need to think twice. If you're really sick, you need to think twice if to go to the hospital. So I think guns falls into the same box because those legislators, ultimately, what they see in front of them is money. And it's really upsetting and sad. And it's something that needs to be changed from the root. It's very painful and scary to see. I think 4 times before my son goes into the subway. And it's a heartbreaking situation. And, all we can do as filmmakers is to flash it, but I have to tell you, people don't necessarily want to see painful things. They want everything to be washed for them because reality is really hard. And, it's easier to see only the glitters of things.
What about the theme of transplant surgery and organ transplantation and giving life in that way? That seemed very important to the series.
Yes, it's something we dealt with before. We did it in Israel as well. In Israel, it's more easy to be able to access both donor and receiver. Here, the laws are more protective, which is fine with me. I think the more important thing is to actually show that people do that. And instead of someone wasting his organ and let them sink into the ground, it actually goes and saves someone. It's very interesting, very important. It's something to advocate for. And like I said, we do have a mission in what we're doing. We want to affect change. And this was definitely one of the things that we wanted to promote. It's a worldwide issue. It's not just here. It's a problem all over the world.
Yeah. Mirtha, I want to circle back with what you've shared. You were the featured emergency physician in Lenox Hill and then in Emergency NYC. At this point, having completed both of these projects, what's keeping you up at night?
It's a wonderful question. I think about a lot of things lately. I feel that the things I'm thinking about or are keeping me up at night are very different than what was keeping me up 3 years ago. And I'm thinking about how to elevate what's important to me and keeping myself in a state of balance so that I can move my platform forward not only for myself, but also for the people that I'm serving, essentially, that I'm treating. Because I think one of the biggest things of why emergency medicine physicians, and probably other specialties too, are feeling the burnout is, we came back to not only just being doctors and practicing medicine. Now it's almost like we wear many different hats. And there's an ethical and moral portion to this. I don't love going home and knowing that, because of a budget cut, there's no social worker. I don't have an addiction counselor available. And I'm left to, possibly, and I'll call these patients back on my own on, my off time. And there's a lot of moral heaviness involved in that. So I'm taking a lot more home with me. So now a lot of things are keeping me up at night that didn't before. And, and it all translates, like Ruthie mentioned, to your own family. This is not a place where I want my kids to be. I don't want to see my parents in a place like this, or my spouse. And so how do I protect them and at the same time keep myself balanced so that I can be a better person all around? And, at the same time, I have to raise humans that I want them to be good. I want them to be good humans and understand, their roots, their foundation, and really the severity of, they don't have to know everything that's going on around them. They're too young. They're not like older children, but understanding the power of resilience and building a confidence that, personally, it took me a while to build that confidence to really elevate my voice.
Mirtha was talking about anxiety. For me, when I don't portray these stories, when I don't flash those stories, when I don't deal with things and show people how it is and what's going on, I get more anxious, even in my own skin, because I'm not there, I'm not experiencing it. There's something about dealing with this field as a filmmaker and as a spectacle that really allows you to look deep into those things you're afraid of, and being able to actually harness them, deal with them, be more knowledgeable. So I think it's in that sense, and it's also the experience of people that watch this show. They say, I was so afraid, I was skittish, I was this and that. It was so awkward for me to see these things. But now when I saw that, I feel like so much more empowered and knowledgeable. And I thank you for it. Like these are the letters that I get. And we get like literally hundreds of them. People are so appreciative of the fact that we expose them to something that they were dreading. And now once they faced it, they realize how important it is to be knowledgeable and to see it. And I think also for Mirtha and a lot of the physicians that we captured, these are super sensitive people that I know that if they won't be involved in giving and doing for others, they will be so anxious and so disturbed, because there's something so therapeutic in the ability to actually heal people and help them resolve their issues, even though you're so small in the process and this is incremental, like piece in this puzzle. But it's so much better than, the other option of not being involved, not being engaged, or not doing anything.
The Resa wrap up. Special thanks to Ruthie and to Mirtha. You are respected, you are appreciated, and I love your voice. I love your authenticity, and I love how much you feel the importance of this work. 3 take-home points I have for you, audience, is number 1, storytelling, number 2, the cumulative effects of trauma, and number 3, gun violence. Stories connect us. Stories move us. Stories provide understanding. Stories provide perspective and a window into a life that maybe is not your life, but it is the life of others. Next, the cumulative effects of trauma. If you were to look at the archives of the Visible Voices podcast and listen to some of the conversations, this is a topic that comes up a lot with my guests. I think because it's something that I see, it's something that I feel with my guests. And I think many people coming out of the pandemic and even pre-pandemic, just based on the way some of our institutions and workplaces are structured, are really traumatized. Finally, gun violence, a uniquely American epidemic. And boy, is it a disease. I think all of us should think about, take a deep look on how we can do better, how we can make a difference, how we can create safer society for everybody. That's what I got this week. See you next time. The Visible Voices podcast amplifies voices both known and unknown, discussing topics of healthcare, equity, and current trends. We are a production of the People's Media Network. Our team includes Dr. Giuliano DePortu and me, Dr. Resa E. Lewis. Please find me on social media at Resa E. Lewis and through the website, thevisiblevoicespodcast.com. If you like the podcast, please rate and review us. Share the podcast with a friend today. Thank you so much for listening, and as always, to be continued.